Across Nigeria, about 1 million young people gain admission into the country's 301 universities yearly. But can Nigerian universities cater to the teeming population of young people?
But here we tend to struggle for some things in the classrooms. Our classrooms are not really adequate enough for us to study.
The government university here, the payment is not that fair, and that is why some of the lecturers would sometimes limit themselves from coming to class at appropriate time. I could remember when the lecturer says, I am already teaching beyond what I'm being paid for. You can imagine that.
I will not really blame the lecturers or the ASUU board itself. It's from the bad government. They were promised a particular amount of money to be distributed, and they didn't even achieve quarter half of it to the board. So these are people that have families at home, so that probably wants to feed and everything, and they're being owed by the government. So that if I was them, I'd go on strike soon.
But in the private university sector, the story is quite different. Students here have quality education, no interruptions, and remarkable facilities.
ASUU strike is a very bad thing, especially to the students, because everybody deserves to have access to an education, whether it's a private or a government university. And then I also feel like the staff need to be paid for what they do, because they're working hard and they need to be paid for their services.
Dr. Jacob has had teaching experience in both public and private universities.
The private educational system generally presents a picture of the ideal, what a university or educational system should be, ideally. In the public sector, you find the real situation, all right? I remember teaching a class of over 1,030 students, all right, a single individual. How do you establish class control? How do you follow up on individual performances to appreciate when they've started making improvements? How do you mentor? How do you guide? How do you coach? And so the issues, the problems of supervision, all right, major issues. And then the issue of infrastructural deficit is also a fundamental problem. So you find a lot of public university or public educational systems struggling to meet up or to measure up with the private educational facilities that we have.
The biggest challenge for Nigeria's higher education sector is perhaps the lack of adequate funding.
Higher education requires a lot of funding, because this is where you train doctors, this is where you train a lot of professionals. And if the lecturers are not well maintained, if the lecturers are not well funded, to do their research, it's going to be very difficult for them to give, quality education.
Unions have been influential in shaping Nigeria's education system. In 1978, a group of university lecturers gathered to form what would be one of the most powerful unions in Nigerian history, the Academic Staff Union of Universities. Their story began in 1965, when Nigeria had just 5 universities. The Nigerian Association of University Teachers was established, representing academic staff at the University of Ibadan, University of Nigeria Nsukka, Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, University of Ife, and the University of Lagos. It operated as a middle-class fraternity, conservative in its approach and sympathetic to the post-colonial government's agenda. But by 1978, military dictatorship had taken root in Nigeria. Academic freedom was under assault. The oil boom that had expanded university funding throughout the 1970s was collapsing, and with it, the promise of quality higher education. University facilities began deteriorating, teacher morale plummeted, and the enabling environment for learning vanished.
Unfortunately, from the 1980s, going forward to 1990s and continuously, the government gradually started neglecting the university education, particularly during the period of the structural adjustment program. This is an entirely different history that we need not delve into, when the neoliberal policies that are implemented based on the prescription of the IMF, World Bank, and other multilateral financial institutions are busy prescribing to the Nigeria's government that, look, university education is not for the government to take the responsibility. It is a shared responsibility, a tripartite process of funding among the government, the parent, and the student. So therefore, gradually for you to access loans from such institutions and other interventions and donations, you must withdraw from funding university system. So our government fell into this trap and continuously started to strangulate the remuneration of the university lecturers.
Two parties, you have an agreement on an issue. Then when it comes to time implementation, you renege. After entering into the agreement, you renege. You will not be able to do it. That will create a problem in the system. That's exactly what is happening in universities. ASUU and federal government strike because of inability of government to implement agreement willingly entered by them. And of course, this agreement has to do with more of the welfare of the ASUU members, the welfare of the lecturers in the system, and of course, the working environment. Things are very much in a bad shape.
ASUU strike has been going on for the longest, since before we started school. So they use the same approach every single time, and these approaches are not being met. You keep going on strike every single time you want an increment for your salary. The government are used to these strategies. That's why they're not even being moved when ASUU say they are going on strike anymore. They don't take it seriously. I think they need to take new approaches to be able to persuade the government to do what they want for them, because it's like the strike thing has become something the government is used to, and which is dragging a lot of people behind. Most people have lives they want to live. You don't expect a course for 4 years, and I'm spending 7 years in school.
For Susan and many young people studying in public universities, the possibility of an ASUU strike always looms heavy. The 1980s were particularly significant for ASUU. In 1988, ASUU organized a national strike, demanding fair wages and university autonomy, two pillars that would anchor subsequent strikes. The military government's response was swift. On August 7, 1988, General Ibrahim Babangida's regime proscribed ASUU, seized all its property, and effectively outlawed the union. For 2 years, ASUU operated in the shadows. When the government finally allowed ASUU to resume operations in 1990, the union had learned a critical lesson. Power yields nothing without struggle. Another strike in 1992 led to another ban. But this time, ASUU's persistence paid off. On September 3, 1992, the government signed an agreement granting several of the union's demands, including the fundamental right to collective bargaining. Under General Sani Abacha's regime in the mid-1990s, ASUU strikes in 1994 and 1996 protested the dismissal of academic staff. When democracy returned to Nigeria in 1999, many expected ASUU's battles to ease. Instead, they intensified between 1999 and 2022. Students who enrolled expecting to complete 4-year degrees found themselves trapped in school, spending up to 6 or 7 years. Parents exhausted their savings. Young people lost faith in a system that was supposed to empower them. In October 2009, representatives of the federal government reached an agreement after 2 years of negotiations. The agreement included details such as the breakdown of lecturers' salary structure, staff loans, pension, overtime, and moderation of examinations. Both parties agreed that each federal university should get at least 1.5 trillion naira between 2009 and 2011, while state universities within the same period should receive 3.6 million naira per student. The agreement also asked that the 2004 Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, JAMB, and the National University Commission Act 2004 be amended. But failure to implement these demands led to another strike in 2022. The strike began in February and stretched for 234 days, nearly 8 months, making it one of the longest strikes in ASUU history.
I'm currently in National University of Lesotho in South Africa as a senior lecturer, but by February I will be moving to University of Namibia as a full professor. And my decision for leaving Nigeria to come here and also to move to Namibia in the few months coming is simple. It has to do with, I had come to the conclusion that the Nigerian government is determined by hook or by crook that it will never improve the university system, irrespective of the struggle, irrespective of the logic, the reasoning, the threat, the industrial action, whatever. The government is simple. Imagine a university professor is getting a salary of $3,000 in 2010, 15 or 16 years back. And today he is being paid $350 as a salary. Just imagine the craziness. Almost he lost about 90% of his salaries to inflation, to other policies, and any reason, any ability, any negotiation to show to the government that this is our situation. And if you want us to compete, you have to improve our living. The government is saying we are going to give you 20% or 35%, take it or leave it, which is not even up to 20% of my previous salaries in 16 years. And apart from that, I have also come to the conclusion that ASUU itself is problematic.
I visit Russia, and when you look at the treatment of the Russian government towards their scholars, you find that it's encouraging because your entitlements, you know, everything you do has been monetized and is going to be paid, you know, within a short period of time. Your excess workload, you know, and your hazards, your overtime and so on. But when you look at the Nigerian context, funding is something very, very minimal. And education sector is where you find the budget is not something to take home about. And that is why you find every time ASUU are agitating, are going on strike, are doing this, because if these universities are well funded, the lecturers are well taken care of, you know, you're going to have kind of Nigeria, we have the brains, we have the talent, but what is the major problem is funding. Today, without, you know, TETFund, I don't think there is anywhere you find, you know, infrastructure in a lot of our universities. And even TETFund was a product of ASUU strike. Without ASUU strike, we couldn't have had TETFund today. So, and when you go to a lot of our state universities, you'll find out almost all of the infrastructure, the constructions you find everywhere. And in fact, even staff development, you find out is TETFund that are doing it. So once higher education is funded properly, you'll find out that we are going to have a lot of quality education. Today, education in Nigeria is dying.
TETFund's intervention model centered on infrastructure. It funded the construction and renovation of classroom blocks, office buildings, laboratories, and libraries. It provided equipment and teaching materials. TETFund became the lifeline, keeping many Nigerian universities from complete collapse. Today, Nigeria has 301 universities spread across its 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. It is the largest higher education system in Africa. Yet, this expansion has occurred even as existing institutions struggle with chronic underfunding. So why does Nigeria keep building new universities? The answer lies in politics as much as policy. Each new university represents jobs, contracts, and prestige for the community that hosts it. Federal lawmakers push for universities in their constituencies. State governors seek the legacy of establishing institutions. Private investors see opportunities in Nigeria's massive unmet demand for higher education. Nigeria allocates less than 7% of its federal budget to education, far below UNESCO's recommended 15 to 20%. Not a single Nigerian university ranks among the world's top 500 institutions. Brain drain accelerates as talented academics flee to better paid positions abroad. ASUU, TETFund, and Nigeria's universities exist in a triangle of mutual dependence and mutual frustration. TETFund provides the infrastructure that allows universities to function. Universities train the students who become Nigeria's workforce, and ASUU fights for the conditions that would allow quality education to occur. Yet, the system lurches from crises to crises. ASUU strikes, however justified by government failures, inflict the most damage on the very students the union claims to protect. Some argue that ASUU must evolve beyond strikes as its primary tool. The union's critics point out that in over 40 years of existence, ASUU has achieved tactical victories but lost the strategic war. Universities remain underfunded. Academic staff remain poorly paid relative to international standards, and the system remains in a loop.